who did it worse? Me or Elaine? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this episode. I loved this episode. I thought it was hilarious. From Elaine's horrible dancing to George being the bad boy. And then poor Jerry got stuck being a bootlegger. And of course, that ending scene with Elaine and Frank Costanza. One of the... people say that was one of the best blooper reels. I agree. I don't think it was the biggest one, though. I still think the biggest one was from the Susie episode, which is coming up very soon. Elaine could not stop laughing during Peterman's eulogy for Susie. I think that one might have been the one where there was the most outtakes, but definitely this one's one of the best ones with that ending scene there. So let's talk about it. The little kicks. So, the episode starts off. Elaine is sharing with the guys that she's having an upcoming office party for the Peterman company, since of course she is in charge now, since Peterman ran off the Burba out of having a meltdown. She basically says, I work my employees hard, and I want to reward them. George basically tries to bribe a way to get him to go to the party. Free food, and of course... he wants to pick up women now that he is back out there. Of course, he ends up coming anyways to the party. And he tries to make conversation with this lady named Anna. But of course, she doesn't not seem interested and she walks away. Elaine makes a toast, and which she says, here's to those who wish us well, and those who don't can go to hell. And then the song Shining Star by Earth, Wind, and Fire starts playing. And she's like, oh, music. Who's ready to start a party? You want me to start the dancing? I'll start the dancing. Elaine starts to dance. And it was not pretty. She was as stiff as a board, throwing the kicks out there, snapping her thumbs left and right or whatnot. It was like a robot, dry heave. How do they describe here? We find the exact words here. He heaved and gyrated to the rhythm only he could feel. It was definitely awkward. And of course, George, who thought he was the lowlife of the party, turns around and sees Elaine dancing. And he just goes, sweet fancy Moses. So then the next day, first, Jerry had gotten him and Kramer 2 tickets to see the sneak peek preview of Death Blow, which there was 2 movies, and it's 2 movies in this episode, both fictional, Death Blow and Cry Again. So Jerry had gotten them tickets. Well, Kramer asked Jerry, could you get another ticket for his friend Brody, who's into that genre? And Jerry's like, I'll see what I could do. And then George comes in. Jerry asks how the party goes. Oh, not too bad. I did pick up on a little juicy little nugget. Have you ever seen Elaine dance? Of course, at the time, Jerry was walking towards his window, and then Jerry just stopped, paused, like, turned around and went, Elaine danced? And then George's like, you know how bad she is at dancing? And he shared some story about 5 years ago. He saw some like Mexican dance group or something like that on the street, and Elaine started dancing. She did the kicks and the thumbs. And then, of course, people were going, and then, of course, Kramer comes back in and says Brody's in. And then Jerry's like, but I haven't gotten the ticket yet. And Kramer goes, well, you better get on it. So then, at the office, Elaine's getting made fun of behind her back. People are like looking at her and laughing at her and everything. And she does not know why. So she talked to Jerry, and she's like, I thought we had a good time, all this, and that happened. But of course, Jerry doesn't want to admit that she's a bad dancer, and George doesn't want to admit that he's a bad dancer. But then Elaine starts thinking George was there, and people knew that they were friends. So she's blaming all this on George. Of course, Anna, the girl who had George had talked at the party, comes in, And then Elaine asked her if she had a good time. And, of course, first thing Anna says was, it was quite a kick. Basically making a reference to Elaine's bad dancing. And then, of course, Elaine, thinking that, people are only frowning on her because of George, starts saying how George is a bad man. He's a bad seed. He's bad this, bad that. Anna, though, however, all of a sudden finds George attractive because he's bad. So she had given George a call. And after having a lunch date with Jerry, George decides to go along and be a bad boy. He had been borrowing his father's new car. He met up with Anna in a park, talked bad to her, which she was definitely turned on by. Elaine, of course, had taken a taxi to get Anna because she still thinks that it's George that is the reason why all her employees are turning their backs on her, and pulls Anna away. Yet they still see each other. Anna even showed up for a meeting wearing George's Yankees coat, and also Elaine got hit in the face with an airplane. Meanwhile, though, at Death Blow, Brody shows up. He's eating this big thing of candy, which he said he got for the three of them to share. And then he pulls out a video camera. Jerry's like, what the heck's going on here? And then Kramer's just like, all casual, like, oh, he does it all the time. And he's like, what? He goes, he tapes the film and then he sells it on the street. So then Jerry pulls Kramer outside and he's like, what do you mean he's a bootlegger? And they get this argument and then they realize they're missing the moves, so they run back in, so we'll talk about this later. Well, then Brody starts cramping because he ended up eating all the candy. And he basically needs to go see a doctor. Kramer takes him to see a doctor, and he wants Jerry to take the camera. And Jerry's like, I ain't doing this. And Brody basically opens up his jacket, shows he has a gun in his pocket, and he's basically threatening him. So Jerry, scared for his life, takes the camera and finishes the rest of the film. Of course, he's upset with Kramer for even bringing Brody and for the bootleg and how it's not legal and all this and that. Well, then Brody comes by the apartment. And of course, Kramer lets him in. And Jerry's like, what are you doing? I don't want to see this guy again. Brody, though, says that Jerry has great camera skills. And was very impressed by how he had shot the rest of that movie. So he gave him another project. This movie called Cry, Cry Again. He wants it the next day by 3 o'clock. And Jerry doesn't want to do this. And he sends Kramer to the movies instead to do it for him. But then, of course, Kramer did a horrible job compared to what Jerry did. So then, Jerry didn't want to give Brody the tape because they were afraid that what if Brody tried to kill Jerry, because he was very impressed by how Jerry did before. So, of course, they kept, trying to push it off, but Brody was getting more and more angry about it. And then, of course, Elaine's still struggling to, figure out what's going on. She really thinks it's George. And then, of course, when she started dancing in front of Kramer says something that Elaine stinks. And then he walks away. And then finally, after Elaine harasses Jerry admits to Elaine that the reason why people are frowning upon her is because of her dancing. It's not George. He's like, I'm not that bad. He's like, oh, you're bad. And then whenever he says, I have to go do some laundry right back, he walks out, and Elaine was like so stunned that she's that bad at dancing, she really thought she wasn't bad. But then she sees the video camera on the counter, which is not a good thing. Of course, then Elaine pulls Anna into the office and calls George on speakerphone, and Elaine apologizes to George for making him out to be the bad person. And George, for freaking out, is like, Elaine, pick up the phone. He was on speakerphone. He's like, Elaine, pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. Which, of course, Jerry didn't want Elaine to reveal that George is not a bad boy, because then Anna would be into him. And, of course, she was slowly being turned off by him. Until he hears Jerry talking to Kramer about the bootleg and stuff. And then he tells Anna he's a bootlegger. And he starts speeding. And then he gets arrested. And then while that's going on, whenever Kramer went in to let Jerry know that George was arrested, they were watching the tape again. And then they realized that Elaine had taken the tape and started taping her dance moves over the ending of Cry, Cry Again. So then they're like, oh shoot, we're in big trouble here. But yet they still gave Brody the tape. But Brody had not seen the movie, so they warned him, well, just so you know, they do this, there's this weird dance at the end of it and whatnot. Which, of course, in the last scene, we'll get to the real, in the closing credits, there is Jerry and Elaine walking down the street, walking down the street, and they're talking about both the movies, and then she wanted to grab a copy of Cry, Cry Again that Jerry made. He's like, oh, no, you don't want to. And then, of course, all the people on the street started mocking the way how Elaine was dancing. But anyway, so in the last scene, George was crying at the police station with Anna, and she's like, it's okay, George, just paid a fine. He's like, why did the police officer have to yell at me? Revealing that George isn't such a big tough guy after all. So obviously he was going to lose out to Anna anyways. So then Elaine came in and basically was there for Anna, and she said, we'll talk about this in the office. And then Frank Costanza walks in and basically saying, I'm sitting in my chair reading the periodicals, they get a call, my son's a bootlegger. Bashed him in the head. And he goes, who put you up to this? Was it her? And points at Anna. And then Elaine goes like, okay, I think you got this all backwards. And then Jerry Stiller goes, my George isn't clever enough to hatch a scheme like this. And she's like, you got that right. And he's like, what the hell does that mean? And of course, this is where, of course, Julia Louis-Dreyfus kept laughing. But of course, with how distinct and funny her laugh is, it was making everybody else laugh too, which kept the blooper reel going on and on and on and on. Of course, again, I still thought that blooper reel in the Susie was going on and on and on and on as well. But then, of course, there was Jerry Stiller's line of, you saying, you want a piece of me? And then Elaine goes, I can drop you like a bag of dirt. You want a piece of me? You got it! Ah! And then, of course, it cuts when Elaine and Frank were going in for the punch. But yeah, Elaine knocked out, basically punched an old man. And Elaine made the comment in the next scene, the scene where they're walking down the street, like, well, he paid a check and I cashed it, or something like that. I can't remember what it was. He wrote the check and I cashed it, or heck he said. But yeah. Of course, Jerry actually apparently had taken that blooper reel on the Tonight Show where he was on. And I guess there was some guy, I guess you could find it online somewhere, who apparently was, confronted by a lion or something like that in the woods or something like that. And I guess he for real said, you want a piece of me? And the lion got scared and ran away. So that line saved someone's life. And of course, Jerry Stiller says, yeah, I'll be driving on the street now, and then I have truck driving out the window and goes, hey, you want a piece of me? Rest in peace, of course, to Jerry Stiller, of course. But, yeah, funny episode. The little kicks, George being a bad boy going, and using, of course, his father's car as, being his bad self when he really isn't. I thought it was pretty funny. Brody was intimidating as hell also, of course. Let me see here. Apparently also in a scene, so a couple trivia facts. Apparently in the scene where Elaine had George on speakerphone apologizing to him from Anna, where George was freaking out because now she's making him look like a good boy again. Apparently George had hamsters in the background. Julia Louis-Dreyfus also says, as far as the dancing scene goes, they had to do it in 2 takes. They originally did it with music, but she then said that she felt she couldn't quite get the rhythm going with the music. So she thought they shot it again without the music, and they added the music in post. She then mentions the key to comedy in that scene was to look as ridiculous as possible while keeping her face full of confidence and thoroughly enjoying. It was important to her to look like a fool, but also funny, in a sense, in spite of the fact that she was deliberately dancing poorly. She was going for a feeling of humiliation, as she wanted people to laugh at her rather than with her. As, again, she wanted to look like she knew what she was doing, but it was that bad, of course. And of course, the story was inspired by the Saturday Night Live boss Lorne Michaels. Spike Feresten, who wrote this episode, started his career as a receptionist at Saturday Night Live. He was at a Saturday Night Live after party, and he saw her dancing, as he'd never seen another human being dance before, and that he heaved and gyrated to the rhythm only he could feel, basically. And again, like I said, the movies Death Blow and Cry, Cry Again were all fictional names. Of course, the song that Elaine danced to little kicks through was Earth, Wind, and Fire's Shining Star. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That is the Little Kicks episode. Very funny episode for sure. Next is The Package. One of my more underrated episodes. One of my personal favorites, personally, and I think it's very underrated for sure. We'll talk about that next as we talk about The Package. So guys, what are your thoughts on The Little Kicks? Do you think Elaine is that bad of a dancer? Whose dance was worse, Elaine's or mine at the beginning of this review? Be honest, I won't be offended. And also, Julie Louis-Dreyfus even said in the interview on the Inside Look that she's not a bad dancer. And she looks dead to the camera and goes, I'm not. Who knows if she is or not. I've never seen her actually dance, for real. But yes, leave thoughts down in the comment section below. Slap a like on the video. Subscribe or contact my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well, at DemandAirboy93. I'll see you guys in the next video, which is The Package. So until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night. Peace out, everybody.